Well, there's not a lot of reason to go to the theaters, but fortunately, there's a lot of reasons to stay home. We're going to talk about that and more on today's episode of the Geek Watch Podcast.
This is the Geek Watch Podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 230 of the Geek Watch Podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's very own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hello, Brian.
We do have to talk about briefly the passing of Dame Maggie Smith.
Yes.
Most people remember her from the Harry Potter series. Mm-hmm. I remember her from some of the old Peter Ustinov, Hercule Poirot mysteries, movie mysteries. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she passed away last week, and I wanted to bring that up in Memoriam.
Yep. I remember her from Clash of the Titans.
Oh, that's right. I remember her from Clash. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. She's one of those genre actors that you may not remember everything she's in, but when you see her in something, you definitely know that it's her. Mm-hmm. It seems like we're losing a lot of
we also lost John Amos.
Yes, we lost John Amos.
Yeah, and the first thing I remember him on was Beastmaster. And,
of course, I'm being much older. I remember him from Good Times.
Yes, yep.
And of course, now this means that we have lost both the fathers from coming to America.
Yep.
So let's talk about something that's not at all depressing. How things are going in the movie theaters right now.
Uh-huh.
Sarcasm sign, because, it's not good. The two big genre movies, of course, that have come out are Megalopolis and Joker 2. And the reviews haven't been good for either one of them.
Yeah, I've heard some crazy stuff about those two.
Like what?
Well, one person went to see Megalopolis, said it was horrible and I was entertained the entire time. And they made a joke out of Joker. That was the big thing, that everyone is hating on Joker.
Yeah, I've heard specifically about Joker is that everything that was great about the first movie, and not everybody liked the first movie. Mm-hmm. But the stuff that people who liked the first movie liked was not in the second one at all. Oh. Now, keep in mind, I haven't seen either one of these movies, so I can't really speak on any of the stuff that I've heard. And I'm not sure I'm going to go see them because it seems like everything is so negative at this point. Trying to be the type of person who isn't thinking to myself, well, I know these movies are going to be bad, but this will give me something to trash on the podcast. I'm trying to stop doing that. Mm-hmm. Trying to follow your lead. So I'm thinking I might wind up taking a pass on both of those. But yeah, I've been hearing just like a lot. The Joker stuff's been pretty bad, but the Megalopolis stuff's been worse.
Oof.
That it's very much indulgent, and Scorsese is just up his own butt about the movie. Huh. That he made a movie for himself and nobody else. I do want to pose this question to you.
Okay.
He made a movie that it doesn't seem like a lot of people like or get or understand or have any interest in seeing. But he absolutely did make the movie he wanted to make from start to finish. So, can you consider that movie a success?
I would consider it art, since the word success is so objective. I'm not sure. Is making a lot of money considered a success? Is getting a lot of exposure considered success? I don't know. He made it for himself, and he made what he wanted to make, and he was trying to say something with it. I would consider it art. I don't know that I would call that a success or not.
It's interesting that you go from the art side of it, because maybe down the road, this movie will be more beloved, because certainly movies like Wizard of Oz, when they first came out, they weren't very much like...
They get cult status.
They get cult status, or for some reason they wind up getting very popular, like It's a Wonderful Life. Mm-hmm. Completely bombed in the box office.
Absolutely. The critics hated it.
But it wound up on television, and then suddenly now it's a beloved staple of the Christmas season. Now, will this movie fall into that? Only time is going to be able to tell. We're not going to know for sure. The studios, they're not interested in making cult classics.
Right.
They're interested in making blockbusters.
Money, yes.
And to dip my toe once again in the very indulgent and ridiculous pool of me trying to say that I'm smarter than Hollywood. But I feel that the problem with Hollywood right now is that they have this weird, screwed up, and wrong-headed idea that trying to make blockbusters is the safe bet. They're wanting to make safe money. And they think that the way to do that is to make these high-concept movies. Now, Megalopolis is definitely a high-concept movie.
Mm-hmm.
But the more high-concept of a movie that you make, the more money that it costs. And it seems like the more likely it's going to be either a wildly successful film or it's going to just tank. It's not going to make back its budget. It's going to either do extremely well or it's just going to take a nosedive. And to me, I feel like the safe bet for films are back in the 90s when we had what you considered the smaller budget independent films that really weren't, though. Like the type of stuff that you'd see Quentin Tarantino making, that you'd see Kevin Smith making to some degree. You had the rom-com, or you had,
Because again, it was, I believe it was Matt Damon talking about it, that you had two releases.
Right.
You had the theater, and then you had build up word of mouth, and then the DVD VHS came out, and people had heard about it, and they were like, I want to see it again. So then they went out and bought it. People were talking about it, and it got another build up. Then it became popular again. So more people wanted to see it, and we don't have that anymore.
I do feel that when you make movies that are just because the budgets aren't as high, that they tend to be very story and character driven, and they're not concept driven, because of the fact that that type of story, you don't get a massive audience necessarily, because these do tend to be niche films, but the people who really like that kind of stuff really like that kind of stuff. And you don't have the wild swings of wins and losses because of the size of the budget. So if it does extremely well, like a Paranormal Activity,
Oh, yeah.
you make a ton of money. If it doesn't do so well, you haven't lost as much money as if you spent $100 million on a movie. You don't have to swing for the fences every time. To my mind, it seems like the safe bet is going to be more of these independent feeling movies where you can put something out that doesn't have a massive budget, that doesn't have this huge concept movie, that doesn't have to...
Big director, big star, big
Yeah.
names.
Yeah, and it doesn't require what in Hollywood they call a 4-quadrant movie, where it hits the 4 different types of viewers that you get from movies, that you can niche a little bit and get away with it and still make a profit. To me, that seems like that's the way to go. Then again, the problem with Hollywood right now, to my mind, is that changing direction is not really easy, because you have a situation very similar to the Emperor's New Clothes. It's like no one wants to be the person saying, hey, maybe we should look at lower budget films, because if they're the one person saying it and everybody else gangs up on you, like, oh, that's not the conventional wisdom. Obviously, you don't know how to make a movie in Hollywood, and then they lose their job. So nobody's going to be the one to pull the trigger. So I don't know what it's going to take except an awful lot of pain. Like the issue with New Line Cinema, they might just be forced to make a lower budget film because they're not going to have the money to do a higher budget film, because they have lost their shirts on several movies this year. And so maybe they get to a point where they just don't have the money and they're going to have to do something a little bit smaller, and that rights the ship for them. And maybe other studios are going, hey, wait a minute, that might be a route to go. So it may just come from a place of pain, and that's it. So,
Could be.
and I'm thinking about the movies that are coming out. I can think, maybe there's 1 or 2 that I'm interested in this year, but I'm curious about Moana 2. Obviously, I'm interested in seeing Wicked, Nosferatu for Christmas. But there's not anything that's really blowing me away that I feel like, oh my God, I absolutely have to see it. But there's a couple of things that are going to lead me out to the theaters, but it seems like television is where the good stuff is right now. Even the movies that have done really well, now they're starting to come out in streaming. Deadpool and Wolverine is now on streaming. Okay. And because I want to put a little bit of good news in, this hasn't been confirmed yet, although it has been reported in Variety that this is a possibility. We may wind up seeing Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman host the Oscars next year.
Aww.
I think that would be amazing.
That'd be adorable.
Definitely the Oscars need a boost. Less and less people are watching.
Yeah, I haven't
now.
watched it in years.
Yeah. So maybe something like that will get people interested again. But as far as television is concerned, let's talk about Agatha All Along. We've gotten episode 4 now.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Well, of course I loved it.
Yeah.
Color glasses and everything. And I love the musical number. And when that just makes my heart sing. And for a second, I thought we were getting Sharon back just for a second. But I was excited to see Aubrey Plaza. We've been waiting for her to come and join the journey. So we finally get her, loving her character. And so nuanced. And don't even have to say lines to know their history and know what they've been through with each other, and all the characters are just fantastic in that way.
Yeah.
And more we're getting with this coven and these women. It's just, I'm loving this story more, and I'm just excited about this journey.
Oh, yes. Well, let's dip into spoilers because I do definitely want to talk about this episode. I do like how they've redone the song and the lines that they added to it.
Yep.
And this month there is going to be an Agatha All Along soundtrack that's coming out.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm curious, and when it gets closer to release date, if we're going to get a track list. But it does seem like, obviously, there's a couple of songs that'll be on there.
Oh, yeah.
But I did love the 60s rock and roll vibe of the set. There were a few things that I have noticed. Lilia seems to be spouting off just weird things throughout the show. And I'm sure
prophecies, yeah.
little prophecies. And it's going to be interesting to see how they tie together, because it's easy to go, oh, she's just talking weird again. But it's like, oh, wait a minute now.
They're going to add up to something. Absolutely.
They're definitely going to. There were a lot of moments in this episode that were very much the Chekhov's rifle over the mantelpiece. The comment, for example, in that vein is how Agatha admitted there was only like her and one other witch that made it to the end of the road the last time. Now, she didn't say any other witches went with her, but I have a feeling maybe that was the case. But who's that other witch? I don't think it's Rhea, because when she first appeared there on the road, it seemed like everything was new to her.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this is the road. And then she goes skipping along.
The Wizard of Oz.
Just like the Wizard of Oz.
Yes. Because there's a lot of Wizard of Oz. And I noticed how the leaves went from the shades of blue and marine, because, of course, it was a water trial, to the autumn fiery colors, because
now it's a fire.
The fire trial, for sure. And I love how Alice's story and her curse became front and center to this episode. That was a payoff again to her story, and how you've developed her story a little bit more. But if we want to talk about the big reveal at the end, where Rio says to Agatha, "It's not your son," which was enough to make Agatha walk off, the question is, what does she mean by that? Because it seems like the obvious takeaway from that is that's not the son she traded away.
Right.
This is another character. Maybe it's Wiccan. But another way to read that is he's not your son because you gave him away. So he doesn't belong to you anymore. You traded him for the Darkhold, and so he isn't your son anymore. He doesn't belong to you anymore. So maybe that's what it means. There's an ambiguity to the way that line's delivered, and it seems like there's a path that's an easy assumption to make that maybe is not the route to go, which to me is amazing storytelling. Oh my goodness, this seems like we were getting a good series, doesn't it? Because there's a lot to talk about and a lot to think about. This show is really doing it for me. I'm really enjoying it because definitely giving us a lot to talk about and a lot to think about. And I'm going to keep saying it because they keep doing it. I love how we're getting mysteries and not mystery boxes.
Yeah.
We are getting little pieces that are worth talking about and puzzling out and trying to figure out, because they're going somewhere. They're not going into dead ends.
It's just the right amount of camp, which I love campy anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And even they're frustrated at having to do a musical number. And it goes right along with the story that they have to do a musical number. And I just love it.
Oh, yeah. And I will tell you, the same way you were swerved thinking that we might be getting Sharon back, I was swerved a little bit thinking we might lose Teen.
Right.
Which is weird because I've seen the trailer for the show and I know he's in other places.
Yeah.
But I thought, oh my God, is he really going to die here? But it allowed us to develop the story with Agatha and the teen, and you can tell that she's invested in this young man. Although she plays it off, you can tell she cares to some degree.
Oh, yeah.
But there's tension between the two of them, obviously, with the fact that Agatha doesn't want to let on that she cares more than she does, and the Coven wants her to tell him the truth, especially about what did she do with her son.
And maybe she can't, and maybe she did put the glyph on him. And
There's definitely more to be developed about the teen story, because when you're watching the end credits, his name appears over a newspaper article about a fatal crash in Westview. Did something happen to this kid? Did this kid die, maybe?
oh, yeah.
We don't know, but there's obviously more going on.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we have Aubrey Plaza's character, Rio,
Mm-hmm.
we have her as
The Green Witch.
the Green Witch. Maybe not the antagonist as much as a contagonist,
Mm-hmm.
but she does add a lot of tension to the group now, because obviously the issues between her and Agatha, and these issues run deep.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
We know that she does want Agatha dead. We went through that storyline, and
Yeah. We also know that she cares a great deal about Agatha, and Agatha does seem to care a great deal about her, and that
absolutely.
there's certainly an implied relationship. But there's some questions to be answered. If Agatha has a son, who's the father? That's a question that hasn't even been addressed, much less answered.
With a name like Nick Scratch, I can only think of who the father must be, but that's just in my...
It's a possibility that they take a little bit of the Scarlet Witch story and change it up a little bit. But the other thing, too, is, of course, that toward the end, when Lilia grabs Rio before she walks off to follow Agatha and says, "Don't think that I forgot what you said in the recording
the
booth."
bodies. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So there's definitely tension, not just between Rio and Agatha, but the rest of the Coven.
Yep.
Obviously, a lot of that's going to build up, because we haven't had the Earth trial yet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely going to be Rio's trial.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's going to be interesting. But I'm wondering if we're going to get Rio's trial first, or we're going to get Lila's trial. I'm assuming that Lila is going to be heir, which makes sense because she's the prophet. She has visions. And with Rio being the Green Witch and Earth, that's got to be her element. So I don't know which one we're going to get first. Rio seems to be the one I'm thinking that she'll be last, just because there's so much juicy mystery there that it would be nice to get a little extra build on it. But keep in mind, we've got 5 more episodes
Right.
left.
Yeah.
5 episodes, 3 trials. I don't see any of the trials necessarily going over 2 episodes. And of course, I don't think the last 2 will have anything to do with a trial. That could give us Lila's trial, it could give us Rio's trial, and then, of course, Agatha's trial. So we might see that in the next 3. And once that's done, that may lead up to our 2-part season finale. Good Lord, there's so much they can do with a lot of this.
Yeah.
Now, where they're going to go from here and what we're going to see next week, I just don't know. But I guess we'll see.
We shall see.
And with that said, we come to the end of episode 230. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. From Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.